So welcome to day 5, the last day of the 2021 Planetary Health Annual Meeting, co-hosted by the University of Sao Paulo and the Planetary Health Alliance based in Boston, Massachusetts. I'm Marie Studer, the Senior Program Manager for the Planetary Health Alliance, and I'm so grateful that all of you are joining us today, not only the speakers and panelists, but also all of the audience. As you know, for those who have joined us, we've had an incredible week. And so there's a lot to think about, a lot to process, and a lot of conversation that's really going to be taking place in this, our closing conversation. Before I introduce this panel, however, I do really want to invite all of you to also join our closing ceremony, which will take place after this event. And you'll have to go to another Zoom room to attend. So please do consider coming to our closing ceremony after this panel. But right now, I'm very pleased to be introducing this panel entitled Activating the Mean Stream, Our Current Planetary Health Mission to Protect the Future. And it is now my sincere pleasure and great honor to introduce Sarah Finnie Robinson. Hello, Sarah.
Hello, Marie.
Sarah is the founding director of the 51% Project, a climate communication initiative at Boston University's Institute for Sustainable Energy. She holds faculty appointments at Boston University's College of Communication and at the graduate program in Urban Biogeoscience and Environmental Health. She's the founding partner of WeSpire, whose behavior change platform is used at S&P 100 corporations to engage employees on sustainability and other purpose-driven initiatives. Her ongoing research investigates barriers and accelerators to corporate climate action, including stakeholder engagement at Princeton University's Behavioral Science for Policy Lab. She serves on the Advisory Council of Boston Harbor Now and its Climate Roundtable, and she's on the board of Eco America. She began her career at The New Yorker and continued at The Atlantic and at iVillage, where she was the launch content director. And she studied at both Princeton University and Middlebury College, Bread Loaf School. In addition, we are extremely pleased to have Sarah as an advisory member of the Planetary Health Alliance, where she works tirelessly and with good humor, I might say, to guide and support our strategy and initiatives. For all of this and more, we thank you. So welcome, Sarah. I now turn it over to you to lead this panel.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Marie. And it's my honor to be here. It's my honor to be associated with the Planetary Health Alliance. I think that anyone who has been part of this convening this week understands that this is an absolutely exceptional, young, vivacious. If this were a person, I would want to be having breakfast, lunch, and dinner with this person every single day, because there's so much energy here and such a variety of viewpoints. And I'm excited about our panel today because we have 3 more amazing points of view that are about to spark into your Zoom here. Justin Worland is, I hate to have favorites, but what he's doing at Time Magazine is just unbelievable. Makes me go back to the newsstand to actually buy real issues of the magazine, even as much as I love the digital edition. And so I encourage all of you to check out what's going on with the climate coverage and planetary health coverage and reporting. And we'll hear more about that this morning because I'm obsessed with it. We have international activist Hindou, Oumarou, Ibrahim, and I must say fashionista, always putting me to shame with the most amazing outfits. And I can't wait to get on a plane and fly to wherever you are, and you can be my personal stylist and I can get out of this plain white shirt. And we will hear about your experiences recently. And then also Herton Escobar, reporter based in Sao Paulo, Brazil, who has contributed so much to our understanding, speaking as a United States citizen, admittedly, our understanding of the very complex planetary health issues and power struggles, the politics, all of the stakeholders at play in that critical area of the Amazon, the lungs of the world. So our session right now will lead into, as Marie mentioned, the launch of this historic Sao Paulo Declaration on Planetary Health, which is a living document that everyone is welcome to contribute to. And that just exemplifies the spirit of this collaboratory alliance as well. And so it's going to be just amazing to see how that turns out as a document, I think in about a month. And we'll be sure to let you all know, of course, when that's about to launch, and so you can share it and live by it as we all motor forward here in this incredibly important year, 2021. It's been an extraordinary week at the Planetary Health Annual Meeting. We've had 4,500 attendees roughly, which is incredible. Thank you to Zoom for that. We usually meet in person, and next year planning to meet in person in Boston. So, we've adjusted to this new digital format, and that has allowed just a plethora of new participation, new voices. We've had hundreds of plenary talks, panels, lightning presentations, poster sessions, and from 115 countries, I believe, and all translated from this English. And I will remember to slow down so the translators can do their work, into Portuguese, Spanish, French, and Mandarin. So we have a truly global engaged audience of participants, all of whom are involved somehow in solutions, engaging others locally, globally, in their countries, their businesses, in science, teaching, researching, innovating, writing, filming, and also those who are investing in the myriad fabulous opportunities that we all have as an international community to address the urgent issues of planetary health. As we wrestle with COVID around the world, I am an English major, as Marie mentioned. My graduate work is in English literature. So Shakespeare could not have made this up. This is an incredible situation that we're in right now. And we know one thing for sure, amid all of the uncertainty, we have to get this right now. And so all of us need to really be paying attention and doing everything we can, and really looking in the mirror and saying, what is it that I do best? And then do it in collaboration, in partnership, and in consultation with everyone else who's involved. We're all on the same team. So I'd just like to recap how this annual meeting was organized around 5 pillars. Because it was an extraordinary framework, I think, for the discussions this week, and it will make it possible for us to go back to the recordings again and again and use them as a resource. So the first day was devoted to foundational values for planetary health, including what does it mean to be happy in the 21st century? The second day was devoted to knowledge generation and funding for this knowledge generation, because it doesn't happen for free. And so we heard from some of the world's most capacious funders, and those are fascinating sessions if you haven't caught up with them already on day 2. Funding for action, outreach, education, and for cross-disciplinary collaboration, which is what we need, despite the traditional systems in academia where things are very much siloed. And so much exciting work is going on, multidisciplinary, bringing in all kinds of diverse points of view. The third day, the third pillar, role of economics and the private sector, money. So we know this is important, and we have to get this right as well. The tens of trillions of dollars that have been invested where they have been for my entire life need to shift, and they're en route. And that needs to happen faster than it already is. The fourth day, governance and cooperation. And the fifth day, today, social movements and social change. So people taking the lead on action, that's all of us. It's like, don't wait around for someone else to do this. We all have a role to play. Each one of us has an assignment, and we can all be so influential as trusted messengers in our networks. So many key takeaways, so much extraordinary content and conversation in our hearts and our minds. We look forward to a great discussion that's going to inspire us even more to go out and make the most of every opportunity to be part of the planetary health solution. And please, audience, we're looking forward to having your questions as part of this panel. And with that, I think we're gonna move right along. And I'd just like to mention one thing in this country. As I mentioned, I'm a United States citizen. All of us, I hope this is not a naive optimism, but I sure do feel better now that our country is back in the Paris Agreement and that we have an administration in the White House and all across every agency of the government that really does seem to be populated with the people who I know from my work have been the authentic, real deal climate, planetary health rock stars. They know their way around this entire area. They know what policy needs to happen. They know how to move the markets and how to engage the CEOs and the financial players, the big banks who need to be involved. So I think that we can all just, fingers crossed, hope that this is going to go extremely well this year and that we will continue to have great progress. And we're going to actually hear from Hindou, was actually participated at the White House summit that occurred last week, just a week ago on Thursday and Friday. So we'll do that. So the idea that climate and health and the environment and racial justice are all connected is a new idea, at least it is in our country. And these giant systemic issues can and will actually be addressed via a bold generational strategy for dealing with the global pandemic and the comprehensive recovery and restructuring that is the absolutely best way forward and really is our only choice. So that climate and equity are part of each and every decision that is made from the top. This is a big change. I'd like to kick off with asking each one of the panelists to give just a brief introduction. And we can all see their biographies and accomplishments and so on the website. So my question is more to get sort of inside your minds. Here we are, it's Friday, it's the last day of April in the year 2021. What are you thinking? What are you thinking? Where are your heads at with the full month of Earth Month and this White House summit that I just mentioned, final day of this incredible convening of thousands of people from all around the world? Share with us, if you will, your thoughts, insights about this very moment of time. And I'd like to give each of you a good 4 or 5 minutes to answer that. And I'm hoping, Justin, that we can, Herton, I'm sorry, that we can begin with you.
Okay, let's try. Thank you, Sarah, for the introduction, and good afternoon, everyone. Wow, how am I feeling right now? That's
how are you feeling right now? I asked you what it's like in Brazil. I haven't been there, and I imagine you lead sort of a cloak and dagger existence with lots of potential danger around every corner. It sounds like a pretty incendiary situation and dangerous to me.
Yeah, well, let me start with the disclaimer then. Considering I'm speaking I live in Brazil, and all my opinions and comments here will be skewed toward pessimism, which I know is not maybe the reality of the rest of the world. The situation we're dealing with here is just so difficult, and so I'll try to leave that pessimism aside when we look at the global landscape. But I'm not feeling very optimistic at this point because of everything that's happening here. But at the same time, I did watch the Climate Leader Summit last week and watch some of the events from this conference this week, which are so enlightening. And it was such a relief to see Biden and Kerry and all these people who really care about planetary health and the future of the planet and humankind. It's like, whoa, what a relief that we have saying, sanity is back on the table, basically. And so that has been very refreshing and kind of brings back the hope that even though the situation, even at the global level, is very challenging, and I don't know if we're going to be able to make all the changes that we need to make in a proper time frame to avoid some of the more, difficult consequences of climate change and all. But at least, I think there's light back in the room. There's hope. We have room for hope again, and I'm hoping we can find that hope again here in Brazil in the next couple of years, and kind of, so I can come back here and say what you said, Sarah. That I'm feeling optimistic again. But the challenge in Brazil, particularly, the challenges are very, very big right now.
Yeah. And kudos for, I think it's amazing that our co-host team from the University of Sao Paulo has just been unflappable throughout. I haven't detected, anything but just forward momentum, but great wisdom coming from living in the situation where you are right now. So I think your pessimism is warranted. It's realistic. It's founded, and we need to remember it. We can't be just like giddy yet. It's not really time to celebrate at all. But there's a feeling of relief on this side of things.
Yes.
So, thank you very much, Hindou. I am hoping that you might tell us a little bit what you've been doing and what is your perception of what's going on in the United States, especially with your invitation to be one of the honored guests at the summit last week? What was that like? Take us into that experience a little bit, if you would.
Sure. Thank you, Sarah. Hi, everyone. I'm very happy to be in this panel with Herton, Justin, and all. And yeah, so what I'm feeling, and especially coming out from the Biden summit on climate change, I feel hope. I feel hope when just I hear all these head of state taking the floor and saying they are back on all reducing the emissions. When I see China, who is very far, but coming saying, I'm going to reduce my emissions. And I see that US, after 4 years of darkness, within all the climate, justice, environment, coming back. So I feel hope. But my hope is also limited by what Herton said, the pessimist, because I'm feeling that I can't anymore accommodate the talks. I wanted to see action. I'm so on hurry right now. When you ask me my feeling, I'm very on hurry to see where are the action. We wanted to see what is they are saying, turning into a reality. When they talk about reducing the emissions, did they have an action plan to how they are going to do it? It is very easy to say by 2030, I do A, 2050, I do B, but how are you doing your A? How are you doing it this year right now? I also feel that the Biden event, it was open because they include indigenous peoples. I am one of them. We've been with them in the decision-making discussing, are they going to continuously include the most vulnerable and impacted? And are they going to hear or listen to us? Because it's two different. And are they going to put us in the implementation to give us the capacity? You say the most final things we want is finance accompanying all talks and turn it into action. Are they going to give us? So when I think about all this, I'm like, oh no, maybe I will be pessimist because we are far from what the talks is saying. So that's my feeling now, but we are ready. That's why we are here in this panel or difference. I'm not from US, but I'm feeling what the peoples in US are doing. And I think, I hope also they will feel what I'm experiencing on climate change and planetary health.
That's just excellent. Thank you. And thank you for reminding us of the urgency and the real skepticism that many of us have, that, there's been a lot of talk and no action, a lot of dithering and sort of, do we really need to do this? And we'll do this by 2050. It's not enough, is it? So I'm going to encourage these panelists, to ask each other questions, because I don't think you've had a chance to mill about, we aren't in person, so we haven't had dinner together or anything. And maybe there can be some new relationships here. So Justin, I am so fascinated by the climate is everything packaging that Time has landed on as part of, I believe, the Time 2030 sort of editorial content framework. And if I were working at Time, I would be so delighted to have that editorial strategy mapped out for me. And I'm wondering if you can take us inside a little bit and tell us, how was this positioning conceived and confirmed? Because I know from my own experience that that wasn't just something somebody wrote on a whiteboard and everybody said, okay, let's go with that. So this is a major media corporation and a big business, and you're in business to attract readers and attention and to influence policy and to attract advertisers as well, the big brands that advertise at time.com, which everyone can go and see. So give us, please, if you would,
Yeah,
the big picture and remind us.
Yeah, happy to. And thank you for the introduction. I'm flattered to be here on this panel with Herton and Hindou. So thank you. But I mean, I think there are sort of two threads here. One, the climate is everything concept, which is something that I sort of had been talking about in various ways for a few years now. This idea that climate influences everything in our world, addressing it requires looking across our society, across our politics, across our economy to address it, and that we should stop thinking about it and writing about it as a really siloed issue. And so 2019, we started a newsletter that sort of had this theme. It sort of hit a wall with COVID, and we sort of had to publish less frequently. But I sort of planted that idea back in 2019. And I think a lot of people came to understand that and see that when you think about, when you just, when you take a step back and you think about that, even if you're not familiar with climate, you start to see those connections. And I think a lot of people in the editorial department here began to see that. I think the other thing I would say, with 2030 is that there is a clear understanding, I think, from people who follow international issues that this is a very pivotal decade on a whole bunch of different fronts. And I think, to your point, there is interest from readers across the globe in that. I think, there's a clear signal from corporations, from others that, a media brand would partner with, that this is something of interest. And so, I think there was an alignment between reality, an alignment between, reader interest and an alignment between sort of the bigger picture around, business interests that I think align to make this 2030 package really come to life. And of course, as you said, climate is everything is now a part of that bigger umbrella. But I mean, it's great to work at a place that is putting that kind of focus on these issues.
Yeah, it's awesome. Well, it certainly has turned me into a print subscriber again. So
it's great.
Fortunately for me. Thank you very much. We have a question here from our leader, Dr. Sam Myers, and I would like to pose it to all of you as a conversation starter. Sam has chatted to me. It would be great to hear how the recurring themes of this week's meeting, which I will review in very brief detail, how those themes on planetary health resonate for you and what you see happening around the world. Each of you has such a broad international perspective, yet very distinctive. How do these week's discussions bear on the idea of a 2021 super year? And again, this week we've gone through values, knowledge generation, the role of economics and the private sector, governance and cooperation, and also social movements. So who would like to jump in with that? How did this week's discussions bear on the idea of a 2021 super year? And may I remind you that month 5 of that super year begins tomorrow. So we've already had 1/3 of the year, if my math is right. So how are we going forward? I'm going
Hindou.
to call on you.
Okay. So you see, we all want to just react on it. Well, I think the idea of super years, it's there. It is not because we are starting the 5th years that we cannot make it a super years. We can make it still. And then I think the discussions of the week take the people's all about one thing. We need a partnership, and we need a cross-cutting ideas from the finance to the socials, to climate, environment, health. Everything is interconnected. And Justin, I really like what you said. Everything is interconnected. We all depend from nature. If we harm our nature by losing the biodiversity or climate change, we are harming our food. If we harm our food, we are harming our health. We harm our health, we are harming our economy, etc. And the social justice, inequality, all. So everything is interlinked. So this week showed that working in partnership is the best way to take us out from all those crises. And how we can make it a super years, because these years, for the first time, we are going to have climate change COP, who is the bigger conference, biodiversity COP, who is the bigger conference, desertification COP, who is the bigger conference. 3 environmental COPs at the same time. And of course, we are discussing on how we are going out from this COVID, building back better with the recovery, building our economy, our living in harmony between human being and the nature. So we still can take a right decision by December and make 2021 a super years to start a new decade of our generation.
Yeah, if I may jump in, I agree with Hindou 100%. And I think the agenda of the conference and everything that was discussed really highlights for me how complex the issue is, and how you need all these pillars, all these actors, and working together in partnership. And if one of them doesn't do their part, we're not going to get to the solution that we need. And I think going back to the beginning of the conversation, I think with Biden in the White House, it kind of fills this big gap that was there, that the grid, the biggest powerhouse in the world, politically speaking, is back on the table, working in the right direction. So that's a big relief. But if corporations don't get on board as well, if people don't do their part inside their own homes, and and if we don't engage everyone that needs to be engaged, indigenous populations and everyone, all of society, then it's not going to work. Politicians can't be speaking alone, and corporations can't do what they need to do if they don't have the backup of public policy supporting the change that they need to make. So all these big parts that were brought in to the agenda in the conference this week, I think it just show like all these parts need to be working together toward the same goal. Otherwise, the car is going to break down. We're not going to get where we need to get.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. And Herton, you remind us that so much of this is really, and so do you, Hindou, about human behavior and about ourselves, and how we show up in the world and how we experience life as generations of human beings actually on this planet. And clearly there are shifts going on in taking responsibility and in seizing the new opportunities to be active and responsible and to be as influential as you can, and to say, yeah, I'm sure there's something I can do, instead of just sitting on your sofa sucking your thumb. So I think that this is an opportunity for that kind of a shift to happen. We call it the Great Transition at the Planetary Health Alliance. And to me, it's an enormous socio-cultural transition that is going to be, I have a 3-year-old grandson, and I just think that by the time he's my age, he won't even know what we're talking about, because it will be part of no pun intended, the air we breathe. This will have to be, or else I hate to think about the alternative. So what about you, Justin? What do you think about all of these aspects?
Well, I mean, I agree with everything that's been said. I think the interdisciplinary nature, I think, is what struck me. Just given, I think that's where the conversation is headed, whether it's in the Biden administration talking about, interweaving solutions to all of these various problems that we face, and embedding climate throughout that, but thinking about all these things intersectionally. I think that's a clear area that I think this conversation this week has fed into. But frankly, everything was said before and said so well, so I don't need to elaborate too much.
It's interesting. You're reminding me that one of the recurring data points that is just kind of shocking to me and motivating also at the same time, at least among Americans, and perhaps this is true of other Western nations, is that although there is a high and increasing percentage of us who are concerned, very concerned and alarmed, and who understand about the human impacts on the environment and on our planet, we tend to drastically underestimate how many other people are also concerned about this. And one of the solutions that has been proposed is that we simply start to talk about it more and find easy ways to talk about this. And so all of you are communicators. I am wondering if it rings a bell to you that there are some people who you know in your life who maybe are in your hometown or who you went to school with, who not necessarily people who you work with right now today, who might fit into that category of, yeah, I'm concerned, I get it, something bad is happening, we got to fix it, but I'm not sure what to do, and I'm certainly not sure that anyone else really cares about this yet. So, and that possibly this is too big, too complicated, too expensive to fix. Now, I personally think that the experience of a global pandemic has showed those of us, especially in privileged nations, like what is a global emergency? Now we know, and we can see how important leadership and clear communication and community, just getting together with your pod and applauding every night at 7 p.m. for the nurses and doctors who are working, and all the creative work that's come out, these soloists singing arias from the rooftops in honor of the ways that we are addressing a major pandemic like this. So I'm wondering, that's a lot, and I apologize for that, but I'm wondering if I could get back to, in your own daily lives, we often in the United States, we have this holiday called Thanksgiving, where we get together with all of our relatives, even the most cranky ones. And often there's a joke about your cranky Uncle Harry who just doesn't get it at all. How would you now talk with this person this year now, with the urgency that we know that we have? And Hindou, maybe start with you.
Thank you. Sarah, I think I will just give them an history. Storytelling can work well in this case. I share with you the examples. I'm coming from a Sahel regions. When while reading the report on the climate change impact or watching it in the TV, in my community, we are living the climate change impact, because we are seeing how the season changed. We are seeing how we are living the extreme weather events, from the flood last year, where all our cities are underwater, people's becoming homeless, our crops are underwater, and we end up with the food insecurity that people writing it in the reports. And we are seeing how the climate change making the conflict between the communities, fighting each other until killing, and the migrations internally. I'm not talking about those who cross Mediterranean, who is very sad, but internal migration that people are living from one place to another one. And when I'm seeing all those climate impact, we talk about 1.5 degree, we already have plus 1.5 degree in my home country. During summer, we can go up to 50 degrees Celsius, more than 135 Fahrenheit, just to how people can survive that. So I think I will just tell them how we are living the climate impact. And I will ask them if it is themselves, are they going to act or not? I will share with them the history of how the Amazon getting in the fire, or the US. We are seeing California every year impacting our economy and impacting our health. And we are seeing if our health is also impacted, it is becoming a broader issues like the COVID. Everyone will get impacted. Climate change, you cannot wear the mask. You cannot wash your hand and it's done. You cannot close your frontiers or build a wall. No, it is impacting everyone and it. So if it's impacting everyone, so we need to act all together. I will tell them that even if you turn off the light in your home, it will come. Even if you just go out and support one of the voice and ask the policy to change, it will help. And then it is your choice because it is not your future, it is your present. And I think they will think 2 times before to say, I'm not understanding these issues, because they will understand.
Thank you so much.
I can
Go
jump
for
in.
it.
I just, the phrase I often use is I try to meet people where they are. And so I think it really depends on who I'm talking to and what the particulars of their beliefs and their experiences. And I try to tailor what I say for each and every one of those conversations. I think, you know, the situation in the US around climate has not, I mean, in many places is not yet dire, but it is there, right? And I think most people, you can find a way to point to the subtle things, subtle or dramatic things that are happening, that are changing, that even somebody who's skeptical, quote unquote, of the science can recognize. You know, one of the things I tried to do with this climate is everything story is point to other indicators, right? So maybe you have noticed the fuel efficiency on your car go up, or you've noticed, you know, changes in sort of the agricultural patterns at the farm you work on. And the point being that, you know, the way in which climate is changing our lives is happening, right? So and trying to find ways to show that to people, even if they're primed not to buy it. And I think the thing is that each conversation is different. But I do think, you know, I was literally, I respond to reader emails. I was responding last night to a reader who, you know, sort of came at me saying, how dare you call this a crisis, blah, blah, blah. And, you know, I mean, I had a pleasant exchange and I pointed to him, you know, a few different things, you know, both related to the scientific data, but also related to, you know, the things that I mentioned is the world is changing and you can choose to ignore it, but these are the evidence, this is the evidence. And he didn't say, I believe you now, but he sort of, his tone changed and he's, you know, said, I'm going to think about this some more, which was really remarkable. And to be frank, doesn't happen all the time, but just happened last night. In any case, I meet people where they are, is my sort of saying it short.
I think it's important for all of us as communicators to note that. It's very important, Justin, to understand where people are coming from. And there are many people whose livelihoods and ways of being have been tied up in systems that are harming the planet. And so, you know, I think it helps to understand how fearful and threatened they must feel, of course, in this situation, and to be compassionate in that way, and to support policies that are going to enable a just transition of some sort that will possibly begin to dissolve that just obduracy, like, I don't want to hear about it type of attitude that can't really hold water for too long. I don't know, Herton, I'm so interested in your perspective on this.
Well, I feel that in terms of communication, we've been rather successful in getting the message across and getting people to accept or believe, or whatever term you want to use. And, you know, in the course of the last few decades, since the Earth Summit in '92 here in Brazil, that's what I feel. I feel, you know, the big challenge now is not to convince people that this is a real problem. I think people in general care about these issues, environmental issues. There's a growing concern about the Amazon, the oceans, everything related to climate. So, and I feel in the last few years that there was a little bit of a frustration of people coming to terms with that and like, okay, I realize this is a big issue. I'm concerned about it. I want to do something, and not having the means to do it. For example, in terms of plastic, it's such an enormous problem globally, plastic, and we get people to pay attention to it. But then, okay, so I'm going to try to reduce plastic consumption, and then where are the alternatives? So that's where, going back to the earlier question, we need the corporations, the business and science to come up and okay, people don't want plastic anymore, so we need to give them an option, something else that they can buy that's not going to pollute the planet for the next 500 years. And the climate. So I think people want to do their part, and then they're looking for ways to engage with that. And the big and a huge challenge that's coming up now is misinformation. And I'm sure Justin can relate to this, and everyone who works in communication and journalism, where the informing people was an enormous challenge already, and now on top of informing people, you have to deconstruct all these lies and alternative facts that they're being bombarded every day. And I see this in my family members, people around me, and they come, Herton, is this true? And then you have to waste or spend a lot of your time rather than working to give them correct information, to just deconstructing all the lies that they are being fed on a daily basis. And this is an enormous challenge. I think that's just going to get worse in the near future.
It truly is, because of the vested interests that just don't want the change to happen, I guess. Justin, did you want to weigh in on misinformation a little bit?
Well, I mean, I agree. It's an enormous challenge. I think the challenge is, I think explaining to people who you engage with one-on-one is one thing, and I certainly try to do that. I think, when I think about people that talking about email correspondence with readers, it's very hard to try to have a reasoned discussion if people just are coming with misinformation. And so I do think, for me as a writer, it's important to take a step back and say, you know what, I can't direct my writing trying to prove to people who are unwilling to listen, right? And so I do think it's important, while we should do what we can to better inform these people and help them understand, to not allow that to lose sight of the sort of bigger picture of people who need sort of straight information or analysis of what's happening, but aren't putting their head in the ground, because it's a challenge.
Yes, it is. I wonder if you might give us just a glimpse, because knowing what I know about time, I'm sure you have a pretty rigorous fact checking and staff and resources, so that, because Time would go out of business if all of a sudden we couldn't rely on a publication like that to give us the real goods. So can you tell us just a little bit about the editorial integrity of a company like that?
Sure. I mean, the process for that is a story, particularly a big story, it goes through multiple layers of editing. We have fact checkers who, fact check, the system that you're taught is to fact check. You put a check mark by every word. So you think through every single word to make sure every word, right. And also to compile it's like a dossier of all of the supporting information that backs up everything you've said. I mean, and if there are cases like one of my stories in the last issue that was about a woman whose home had flooded, and it involved some complicated dealings with her, with the bank and all these sort of legal issues. I mean, those stories are all lawyered and have the sort of same due diligence of like every phrase and everything is very closely checked. So you can take confidence in what you read.
Right. Well, so that is good. And that's one of my, when people say, well, what can I do? I say, one thing you can do is figure out where you're getting your information from, and let them be reliable resources that aren't biased or trying to feed you misinformation. All right, we have another question from the audience, and Hindou, you can be the first one to respond if you would. Here's the question. What are the aspects of our battle that most make you hopeful? And what are the ones that most make you think we are too far from reaching our goal? You've already touched on this a little bit, but I don't know if you have any other, with the question posed in that way, what would you like to tell the audience?
Yeah, so I can say what can make me hopeful. It is our broader action that, I mean, not leadership that's coming, like the new leadership on all what we are thinking about our planet. So most of the people's now, and especially when we come back again to the COVID, we are seeing that everyone, when you heal peoples in Brazil, and then there are other peoples who are in US infected, it's not work. That's why what is happening in India right now, everyone relying on the information and we need to act. So we are interconnected. So what gives me hope, while we are interconnected, we have to build the leadership collectively. And it is starting because we are seeing the evidence. So this is really a big hope in maybe we can think about all our planet together and we will work over all this discrimination and all these people who are left behind can be included. And when I come to the climate issues and I see also all the young people's movement and I see all the indigenous people's action on the ground, it gives me hope. I say maybe we can get out from it. But what makes us also different, people still very rely on their own economy, especially the developed countries. They always doing everything. They wanted to protect their own economy, being the number one in economy, being the number one in power, number one in whatever. And that creates a divisions. Why we continuously talking about developed and developing countries, while we are all interconnected, why we still like building all the vaccine now and giving only to the first peoples in the US or in the Europe, without thinking we need to share it with other people in developing countries. So sometimes we are so far from our issues. And I found that very egoistic because as human beings, we must think in the global response to the global crisis. Of course, we need to respect our differentiations. This is our diversity, but in the response to the global crisis. We must respond all together and give developing countries, give the Black, white, women, young, oldest, all at the same level to get this chance and access.
Yeah, totally. Couldn't be clearer. Thank you for expressing that with such grace. Thank you. I have another question from the audience here. Knowing that the most sustainable currency is trust, how to deal with companies and banking who greenwash to make profits by catering to the orientation of public values, spreading misleading propaganda and then misleading the masses. And maybe I'll ask you, Herton, have you seen examples in Brazil where I mean, I think that some of your writing has taken on some of these interests and exposed the kind of activity that we're talking about here in terms of greenwashing.
Well, I think we need to educate consumers to be able to recognize greenwashing and differentiate it from, you know, true commitment or companies that are really committed to what they're saying, not just making something that's good for their profit and it's also good for the planet. So I'll do that because it's good for me as well. And rather, you know, making changes that might not be profitable for them, but it's good for the planet. So thinking beyond their own walls and their own bank accounts. But, you know, I think it's a communication challenge to tell people that, you know, this is BS, pardon my word, but I think it's a communication challenge, and companies
One of my
just need to
favorite
be put to
stories.
shame when they try to do that. No.
Yeah. One of my favorite stories, and this is via the trusted messenger principle of communication, has to do with the CEO, former CEO, I believe, of Royal Dutch Shell, a major oil and gas corporation, whose 9-year-old daughter came home from her very nice school where he sends her to be educated, and sat him down and just railed into him and said, "Daddy, I think your company is doing very bad things for the planet." And you know, it was influential. I heard about this at an event that was at the time of the Paris Agreement in 2015. And since then, if you look at Royal Dutch Shell, they have changed their business model, and they are moving to transition. Is it fast enough? Is it enough? Probably not. But never doubt that a trusted messenger can come in. I mean, sometimes we think of these corporations just monolithic sort of blocks. They're made up of people, and all these people have families, and more, especially the younger generations, are talking about this. And so I go back to my principle of, let's give ourselves permission to talk easily about this in a way that encourages participation in solutions.
Just really
Yes.
quick, I think that connects back to Hindou's answer to the previous question, which is, what makes you hopeful? I think the new generations, you see the kids, the Gretas of the world,
Yeah.
they are coming, they weren't educated like, the older generations were in a fossil fuel world, and they are growing up with a different mindset. And I think hopefully they're going to be able to push through the changes that need to be made. Yeah.
And hopefully the older generations aren't going to say, oh, okay, now they're going to take care of it, because we still all need to be in this together. All right, here's a question for you, Justin, unless you'd like to comment on that.
Well, I have many thoughts, but I'll just to be brief. I mean, I think it's a really interesting point you bring up Shell, and Herton brought up some of the, what are they doing that's good for their bottom line, but actually is the nuance in these pictures, because I think there is sometimes a tendency to say X corporation is bad, X corporation is good, and the truth is very few are just one or the other. And so I think trying to find ways to communicate that nuance is really, really important.
Really important. And another whole flank of stakeholder that has come to the fore is employees. These large corporations, they have hundreds of thousands of employees sometimes, and they're getting active too. And so the best and the brightest are not going to go work for corporations that are
absolutely
really antithetical to these solutions that we absolutely need. All right, I think we just have a few minutes left and a few more questions coming in, so I think I'll go ahead and ask them. Here's one from Rebecca. Thanks for hosting this great panel. You're welcome. I'd love to hear the panelists' perspectives on how they think and talk about the relative importance of motivating individual behavior change versus large-scale systemic change of governments and industries to address planetary health challenges. So we've just been talking about that a little bit, and how governments and industries are actually made up of individuals. So if you see your boss, if you see your manager doing something that is good for the planet, then that will be influential to you. But Hindou, would you like to talk a little bit about that? The difference between the relative importance of motivating individual behavior change. Maybe if you could bring it home to your country and give us a picture of who's in charge there. How is that, the governments and the industries and the private sector, the money that's in charge there?
I think to make them change, they must understand the first resources that they are using. If they do not use them sustainably, the future of the business is done. if you are politicians and individuals, you want people to vote to you. So if you wanted to have the vote of someone, you have to respect what they're saying. Otherwise, you don't have voice. At least that if you don't want to run it in democratic way, so this is another thing. But otherwise, they wanted to have the voice of the peoples. So they must understand that there is no sustainable business or sustainable power without the sustainable resources. And all the health of our planet is linked to the resources that we have. I think one thing people need to understand also, we as human beings, we are not the super species. We are only one of the species of the nature, as the tree, as the birds, as the insect. So why we have to extract the rest of the species? And then because we wanted to have our life to be better, we are seeing that when the industry extract the petrol in the ground, we are seeing how it's impacting our climate. We are seeing when we kill the biodiversity, how it's impacting our health. And I just end quickly by the examples, you know, how we are linked to that individually. Indigenous communities, especially my peoples, when you move with the cattle, you know the place who are impacted with the diseases. You cannot take your cattle there because these diseases must turn to the human being. So then you take your decisions as individuals to go away. So this is very important to think about the global views.
Yeah, totally. So important to be reminded. I mean, maybe Justin could give you a little column at time, Hindou, and that way we would be reminded always.
We can talk after. So we can talk after.
Good. Would anyone else like to talk about that? Or I think I'll move on to this final question that I have, because we only have a few more minutes left of this amazing panel. Thank you all so much. Here's the question. Even though we are already in a digital age, there's still people who have no access to communication because they don't have a telecommunications signal, of course. And this is true in this country as well. It's not just in mountainous indigenous regions. In our country, we have real problems with access to technology and communication, and part of that is generational, you know, that people don't want to. But how can we make planetary health information inclusive for all and make sure that no one is left behind? And I would just remind us all of the Planetary Health Alliance, which provides a network of organizations and now has opened up individual memberships. So this is an enormous opportunity for anyone to sign on if they can possibly get themselves to an internet connection. And then there are resources that will come through that aren't so dependent on the technology to receive them. I don't know, Herton, what you have to say about access.
Very quickly, because we're almost out of time, but
no.
Well, I think technology will take care of that sooner than later. Even indigenous communities deep in the Amazon have some access to information through their, mobiles. I mean, we try to get away from technology, and it's difficult to go to a place where you don't have a signal nowadays. But even if in situations where people don't have direct access, then comes the responsibility of state, of governance, and the public actors need to, regardless of whether a community has access and is aware of the details of climate change, they're feeling the impacts and they need to be protected from it. So even in the situations where there is no access to information, then the public players need to step in and make sure they're securing and including those communities, those people in their agenda.
Yeah, and we have to go, but I can't resist throwing it back at you, media rock stars, which is give us content that's easy to share, please. That's quick and easy, that is easy to understand. Versions of the content that that you think will resonate, and, you know, get a social media team that will help you do that, to be objective. You know, it's hard to be objective about your own writing. Our time is up. Thank you so much, everyone. I'm really hoping that everyone will now proceed over to the closing ceremony of this incredible event and join me in congratulating the organizers while we're there, and also to have a preview of this Sao Paulo Declaration of Planetary Health. We'll hear more about that and how each one of us can contribute to that living document right now. Thank you. Over and out.